Hey everybody, today I want to talk about the idea of crowding out. You know, you've heard that before. Crowding out means if the government has to borrow money, then that takes funds away from the private sector, which could have been used for productive investment. Now, this is all completely wrong, of course, as we know, because the government issues its own money, the money that it spends in. We know that. But let's just say, for example, let's just, for the sake of argument, look at this crowding out idea, this crowding out concept. Let's assume that the government does remove funds from the private sector. So what happens? Does that leave the private sector with no funds to invest? Well, think about it. If the government removes funds from the private sector by borrowing, then what happens? It immediately turns around and spends those funds right back into the economy. The way to think about it, think of a swimming pool with a pump. The pump is removing water from the swimming pool and immediately circulating it back into the swimming pool. And in effect, what happens is nothing. The level of the water does not change, okay? So even if we were to go with this crowding out idea, which is not even applicable, as I said, because it doesn't work that way, but even if it did work that way, the net amount of money in the economy would not change. The government would borrow the money, then it would spend it right back into the economy. You'd have the same level of money, and ostensibly, those very productive folks who had all those savings, well, they'd be there exactly where they were before in their businesses and being very productive, and they'd earn that money back and they'd have those funds again to invest. So, I mean, if you take the idea of the crowding out folks and really think about it, there is no net change in the amount of money in the economy. And actually, we do know that since the government most of the time runs deficits, it's adding to the financial balances of the non-government or the public. It's not removing anything. The whole concept is wrong. It's completely flawed. Okay? It's not like, now, let's think about this for a second. Let's suppose the government runs a surplus. In the case of a surplus, then the government is actually removing those funds from the private sector. In the case of a surplus, let's go back to my swimming pool analogy, that would be the pump draining the water out of the pool. And what would happen to the level of the water then? It goes down. The water, of course, being the funds, the financial balances in the economy. But the funny thing is that the people who talk about this crowding out idea, which again is inapplicable in our current monetary system, but those very people are the same ones arguing for a balanced budget or for the government to cut its spending or, even run a surplus. So their argument would bring about the very draining of funds that they think happens under deficit spending, which doesn't. But if the government did run a surplus or even a balanced budget, it would drain those funds from the private sector. So there is no crowding out. Even if the government did borrow those funds, and again, how does it borrow dollars? The dollars have to be, like, how do you drain a pool that doesn't have water in it? You first have to put the water in it, right? Well, where did the water come from? Where did the water come from? Where did the money come from? The government has to first spend those funds into the economy for it to be able to even borrow it back out. I don't understand how people don't get this. It's very, very simple. How do you drain a swimming pool that has no water in it? You can't, right? You have to add the water first. So the government has to add the funds into the economy first, and it does that through deficit spending, which is simply spending more than it's taking away from us in taxes. That raises the level of those funds. Then if it wants to borrow, which it's not really doing, but let's just call it borrowing, then it could take some of that out, and guess what? It puts it right back in again through spending. So I hope that clarifies that. This whole idea of crowding out is wrong, but unfortunately, it is behind all of the policy measures. This false idea, this false belief, okay, is behind all of the academics, all of the policy measures, all of the media that we hear right now. And it's one of the reasons we have really bad policy that's affecting millions of people, hurting them badly, and keeping the economy from growing and reaching its potential. Anyway, that's it for now. This is Mike Norman saying, see you next time. Bye-bye.